Sarah Mitchell had always been invisible. At 32 years old, she worked as a librarian in the small mountain town of Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Her days followed the same predictable pattern. Wake up at 6:30, make coffee in her tiny apartment above the hardware store, walk 3 blocks to the library, and spend 8 hours organizing books that few people ever checked out. The town itself seemed frozen in time, nestled between towering peaks that cast long shadows across Main Street. Most residents were either retirees who had moved there for the quiet life or young families trying to escape the chaos of city living. Sarah fell into neither category. She had grown up in Cedar Ridge, watching her classmates leave one by one for college or careers in Denver or Colorado Springs, while she stayed behind to care for her aging mother. Her mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving Sarah with a paid-off house, a modest inheritance, and a profound sense of purposelessness. She had never married, had few close friends, and spent most evenings reading mystery novels or watching cooking shows she would never attempt to recreate. The most adventurous thing Sarah had done in recent memory was switching from regular coffee to decaf. But Sarah harbored a secret that even she barely acknowledged. As a child, she had possessed an unusual gift with rifles. Her father, a forest ranger, had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, initially for protection during camping trips. What started as basic safety training quickly revealed something extraordinary. Sarah could hit targets that experienced hunters missed. She could compensate for wind, distance, and elevation with an intuitive understanding that amazed everyone who witnessed it. Her father had encouraged her talent, taking her to local shooting competitions where she consistently outperformed men twice her age. By the time she was 16, Sarah was breaking records at regional competitions across the state. Scout recruiters from the military had begun showing up at events, hoping to recruit the quiet girl with the steady hands and eagle eyes. Then, everything changed. During her senior year of high school, her father suffered a massive heart attack while patrolling a remote section of the national forest. Sarah found herself torn between a potential scholarship to study marksmanship at a prestigious academy and staying home to help her mother cope with sudden widowhood. The choice felt obvious at the time. Family came first, dreams could wait. Years passed, and waiting turned into forgetting. Sarah packed away her rifles in the basement of her childhood home, telling herself she would return to shooting someday when life settled down. Someday never came. Her mother's health declined gradually, requiring more care and attention. The library job provided steady income and flexible hours, allowing Sarah to manage doctor appointments and grocery shopping for 2 people. After her mother's funeral, Sarah had briefly considered unpacking those rifles. She had even driven to the old shooting range outside town one Saturday morning, parking in the gravel lot, and staring at the weathered wooden sign advertising Cedar Ridge Rifle Club, visitors welcome. But, sitting in her aging Honda Civic, she felt paralyzed by doubt and rustiness. What if her skills had vanished completely? What if she could no longer hit the broad side of a barn, let alone distant targets? The humiliation seemed worse than never trying at all. Instead, she returned home and buried herself deeper in routine. Monday through Friday at the library, weekends doing laundry and buying groceries. She volunteered occasionally at the annual town festival, manning a booth that sold raffle tickets for prizes donated by local businesses. Her interactions with other residents remained pleasant, but superficial. Everyone knew Sarah as the reliable librarian who never caused trouble and always remembered to order the books elderly Mrs. Patterson requested about her deceased husband's war service. What nobody knew was that Sarah still dreamed about shooting. Not every night, but often enough that she would wake with phantom sensations of rifle weight against her shoulder and crosshairs dancing behind her closed eyelids. Sometimes she caught herself automatically calculating distance and wind patterns when she walked outside, estimating how challenging it would be to hit the weather vane on the church steeple or the stop sign at the far end of Main Street. The irony was not lost on her that she lived in a region famous for long-distance shooting. The Rocky Mountains provided ideal conditions for extreme marksmanship, with clear air, stable weather patterns, and endless opportunities for challenging shots across vast distances. Professional marksmen and military snipers regularly traveled to Colorado for training exercises. Yet Sarah remained oblivious to this world continuing around her. Her co-workers at the library often speculated about Sarah's love life or lack thereof. Betty, the head librarian who was approaching retirement, frequently hinted that Sarah should join the local hiking club or volunteer at the animal shelter to meet people. "You're still young," Betty would say while reshelving returned books. "You need to get out there and Live a little before you wake up one day and realize life has passed you by. Sarah would smile politely and change the subject, but Betty's words stung because they contained uncomfortable truth. Life was passing her by, had been passing her by for years. She felt like a spectator watching other people pursue their dreams while she remained safely seated in the audience, applauding from a distance. The turning point began on a Tuesday morning in late September when the leaves were just beginning to change color on the mountainsides. Sarah was processing a new shipment of books when she noticed an unusual title among the typical romance novels and celebrity biographies: Extreme Long-Range Shooting, The Science and Art of Precision Marksmanship. The author was someone named David Hartley, and the book appeared to be a technical manual filled with charts, diagrams, and photographs of rifles she did not recognize. Curiosity overcame professionalism as Sarah flipped through the pages instead of immediately cataloging the book. Chapter titles included Understanding Ballistic Coefficients, Reading Wind Patterns at Extended Range, and Equipment Considerations for Shots Beyond 2,000 Yards. The photography showed shooters positioned behind enormous rifles with scopes that looked like small telescopes, aiming at targets so distant they appeared as tiny specks. One photograph particularly captured her attention. It showed a woman, probably around Sarah's age, lying prone behind a massive rifle. The caption read, Amanda Foster prepares for a 3,800-yard shot during the World Long Range Championship in Wyoming. Foster, a former accountant from Ohio, took up extreme long-range shooting at age 30 and won her first national title 2 years later. Sarah stared at the image for several minutes. The woman looked ordinary, like someone who might work at a bank or grocery store. She was not particularly athletic or intimidating, just focused and determined. The idea that a former accountant could master such an extreme skill and compete at the highest level seemed almost impossible, yet there was photographic evidence. That evening, Sarah took the book home instead of adding it to the library collection. She told herself she would catalog it the next morning, but that night she read it cover to cover. The technical information was fascinating but overwhelming, filled with mathematical formulas and physics concepts she only partially understood. What captivated her was the underlying message. Extreme long-range shooting was not about raw talent or natural ability, but about patience, practice, and systematic learning. According to the author, modern equipment and techniques had revolutionized long-distance marksmanship. Shots that were once considered impossible were now routine for dedicated practitioners. The book featured interviews with champions from various backgrounds: teachers, engineers, retirees, even a former ballet dancer who had discovered shooting after a career-ending injury. The common thread among all these success stories was that none of them had started with traditional shooting backgrounds. They were ordinary people who had discovered an extraordinary passion and pursued it with determination. Age, gender, and previous experience mattered far less than commitment to learning and willingness to practice consistently. Sarah found herself mentally calculating whether her childhood shooting experience would translate to extreme long-range marksmanship. The fundamental skills, breath control, trigger discipline, sight alignment, were probably similar. But everything else seemed vastly more complex. The rifles weighed 30 or 40 pounds. The scopes cost more than her car, and successful shots required understanding of atmospheric conditions that changed by the minute. Still, the book insisted that these challenges were surmountable for anyone willing to invest the necessary time and effort. Equipment could be acquired gradually, technical knowledge could be learned through study and practice, and physical skills could be developed through repetition. The author emphasized that extreme long-range shooting was ultimately about problem-solving and mental discipline rather than physical strength or natural talent. For the first time in years, Sarah felt something stirring inside her chest that might have been excitement or possibility. She tried to dismiss the feeling as foolish fantasy, but it persisted through the rest of the week. Every time she walked past the basement door in her house, she thought about those rifles gathering dust in their cases. Every time she looked out the library windows at the distant mountains, she found herself estimating ranges and wind conditions. The breaking point came on Friday afternoon when Betty mentioned that her nephew was visiting for the weekend. He's some kind of shooting instructor for the military, Betty explained while sorting through returned books. Came home from Afghanistan last year, and now teaches other soldiers how to use those big sniper rifles. Says he loves it here because of all the wide open spaces and clean mountain air. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she set down the stack of books she had been organizing. Your nephew teaches long-range shooting? She asked, trying to keep her voice casual despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. Betty looked up from her catalog with surprise. In the 5 years they had worked together, Sarah had never shown interest in anything related to weapons or military topics. Yes, Matt specializes in extreme distance shooting. He says regular soldiers can learn to hit targets over a mile away with the right training and equipment. Sounds impossible to me, but he showed me videos on his phone of people hitting steel plates that looked like pinpricks in the distance. That evening, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable just weeks earlier. She called Betty at home and asked if she could meet her nephew. The conversation was awkward and filled with stammered explanations about childhood shooting experience and recently discovered curiosity about long-range marksmanship. Betty sounded puzzled, but agreed to arrange an introduction. Saturday morning found Sarah standing nervously outside Betty's house, clutching a thermos of coffee like a security blanket. She had changed clothes 3 times, unsure whether to dress practically for potential outdoor activities or professionally to make a good impression. She had settled on jeans and a sweater that split the difference between the two extremes. Matt Williams turned out to be nothing like the intimidating military stereotype Sarah had expected. He was probably 28 years old, average height and build, with an easy smile and calloused hands that suggested familiarity with manual work. His civilian clothes, flannel shirt, and work boots made him look more like a local rancher than a precision shooting instructor. Betty mentioned you might be interested in learning about long-range shooting, Matt said after introductions were complete. Have you done much shooting before? Sarah explained her childhood experience, emphasizing that it had been nearly 15 years since she had fired a rifle. She mentioned the book she had been reading and her growing fascination with extreme distance marksmanship. Matt listened without interruption, occasionally nodding with understanding. The fundamentals you learned as a kid will definitely help, Matt said when she finished. Breath control, trigger squeeze, sight picture. Those basics never change regardless of distance. Everything else can be taught. Would you like to see some equipment? And maybe try a few shots? Sarah's immediate response was yes, but doubt crept in almost immediately. I don't have any gear, she said. And I'm probably too rusty to hit anything beyond 50 yards. Matt grinned. That's what training is for. I've got everything we need in my truck, including rifles set up for beginners. There's a private range about 20 minutes from here where we can shoot out to 1,500 yards. If you're interested, we could head over there this afternoon. The drive to the range gave Sarah time to process what was happening. 3 hours earlier, she had been following her usual Saturday routine of laundry and grocery shopping. Now she was riding in a pickup truck loaded with military-grade shooting equipment, about to attempt something that had seemed like pure fantasy just days before. Matt used the travel time to explain basics about long-range shooting that went far beyond anything covered in the books Sarah had read. Modern precision rifles were essentially scientific instruments, he explained, capable of remarkable accuracy when properly configured and operated. The key was understanding all the variables that affected bullet flight over extreme distances. At 100 yards, you can pretty much point and shoot, Matt said as they turned onto a dirt road leading into the mountains. At 500 yards, you need to account for bullet drop and maybe some wind. At 1,000 yards, you're dealing with atmospheric pressure, humidity, temperature, earth rotation, and wind conditions that might be completely different at your position versus the target location. The range turned out to be a sophisticated facility hidden in a valley between 2 ridge lines. Steel target frames were positioned at various distances up to 2,000 yards, with spotting scopes and wind flags providing real-time environmental information. Several other shooters were already present, their rifles and equipment spread across concrete shooting benches. Matt introduced Sarah to the range owner, a retired Marine named Carlos who had competed professionally before opening the facility. Carlos looked skeptical when Matt mentioned that Sarah was a complete beginner interested in learning extreme long-range techniques. Most people start with basic marksmanship and work their way up gradually, Carlos said diplomatically. Long-range shooting requires a solid foundation in fundamentals before you can worry about hitting targets at extreme distances. Sarah felt her confidence evaporating until Matt intervened. She's got natural ability, he said. I can tell from how she handles equipment and asks questions. Let's start at 300 yards and see what happens. The rifle Matt selected for Sarah's introduction looked nothing like the hunting rifles she remembered from childhood. It weighed nearly 20 pounds and was equipped with a massive scope that provided crystal-clear magnification of distant targets. The bipod legs and adjustable stock made the weapon feel more like a precision instrument than a traditional firearm. Matt spent 30 minutes explaining proper shooting position, scope operation, and basic ballistic concepts before allowing Sarah to chamber her first round. He emphasized that long-range shooting was primarily mental rather than physical. Successful shots required patience, concentration, and systematic analysis of conditions. "Don't worry about hitting the bullseye on your first shot," Matt said as Sarah settled behind the rifle. "Just focus on consistent form and smooth trigger control. The accuracy will come with practice." Sarah's first shot missed the target completely, disappearing into the hillside beyond the 300-yard steel plate. Her second shot was closer, but still wide right. By her fifth shot, she was consistently hitting the edge of the target. By her 10th shot, she was placing rounds within inches of the center. Matt and Carlos exchanged glances that suggested Sarah's rapid progress was unusual. Most beginners required dozens of shots just to hit a 300-yard target consistently. Sarah was demonstrating precision and improvement that typically took weeks of practice to develop. "Let's try 500 yards, Matt suggested after Sarah had fired 20 rounds with increasing accuracy. The 500-yard target appeared much smaller through the scope, requiring precise holdover calculations to compensate for bullet drop. Matt explained the mathematical relationship between distance, bullet velocity, and gravitational effects. Sarah absorbed the information quickly, making mental notes about scope adjustments and aiming points. Her first shot at the extended range was high and left, but not by much. The second shot was much closer. By her sixth shot, she was hitting the 500-yard target with consistency that impressed even Carlos. "This is highly unusual," Carlos admitted as they prepared to move to 700 yards. "I've been teaching long-range shooting for 15 years, and I've never seen a beginner progress this quickly. You have exceptional natural ability combined with obviously good foundational training." The 700-yard shots proved more challenging, requiring precise wind calculations and careful attention to atmospheric conditions that changed throughout the afternoon. Sarah struggled initially, missing several shots completely before beginning to understand the complex relationships between environmental factors and bullet trajectory. Matt provided patient coaching, explaining how to read mirage through the scope, interpret wind flags at multiple distances, and make real-time adjustments based on observed conditions. Sarah found the intellectual challenge fascinating. Long-range shooting was essentially applied physics combined with careful observation and mathematical calculation. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah's shots at 700 yards became increasingly precise. She was not yet hitting the center of the target consistently, but her groups were tight enough to suggest that accuracy would improve with additional practice. Other shooters at the range began paying attention to the quiet woman who was progressing from complete beginner to competent marksman in a single afternoon. Several approached during breaks to introduce themselves and offer encouragement. "You should consider competing," suggested a man named Robert who had been shooting at 1,500 yards with remarkable precision. "There are local matches almost every month, and women competitors are always welcomed. The sport needs more female participants." Sarah laughed nervously. "I've been shooting for exactly 4 hours. I think competition might be a little premature." Robert shook his head. "I've been watching your progress today. With proper equipment and regular practice, you could be competitive within 6 months. The fundamentals are clearly there. Everything else is just experience and refinement." As the sun began setting behind the mountains, Matt suggested one final challenge. "There's an 800-yard target that's been giving me trouble all season," he said. "The wind conditions around that particular ridge are tricky, and the target itself is smaller than the others. Want to try it?" Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as Matt explained the specific challenges of the 800-yard shot. The target was positioned at the base of a steep slope where wind patterns created unpredictable updrafts and crosswinds. Previous shooters had warned that successful hits required both skill and luck. The first shot was wide left, caught by a gust that appeared just as Sarah squeezed the trigger. The second shot was closer but still missed the steel plate. Matt encouraged patience, emphasizing that difficult shots sometimes required multiple attempts to read conditions properly. Sarah's third shot rang against the steel target with a metallic clang that echoed across the valley. The sound was followed by cheers from other shooters who had been watching the attempt. Sarah felt a rush of satisfaction unlike anything she had experienced in years. "That's a hell of a shot for your first day," Carlos said with genuine admiration. "Most of my experienced students struggle with that particular target. You've got real talent for this sport." During the drive back to town, Matt outlined potential next steps for Sarah's development as a long-range shooter. She would need her own equipment, regular practice time, and systematic training in advanced techniques. The financial investment would be substantial, but Matt assured her that quality used equipment was available for reasonable prices. More importantly, she would need to commit to consistent practice and continuous learning. Long-range shooting was a sport where small improvements required significant effort, but the rewards were proportionally satisfying. There's a regional competition in 6 weeks, Matt mentioned as they pulled into Betty's driveway. Nothing too serious, just local shooters trying to hit targets out to 1,200 yards. If you're interested in seeing what competitive shooting looks like, you should come watch. It might give you ideas about future goals. That night, Sarah lay awake replaying every shot from the afternoon. Her shoulder was slightly sore from the rifle recoil, and her trigger finger had a small callus from dozens of precise squeezes. But, more significantly, she felt energized and purposeful for the first time in months. The ordinary librarian who had awakened that morning was gone, replaced by someone with direction and passion. Monday morning arrived with Sarah feeling like she was living in 2 different worlds. At the library, she maintained her usual professional demeanor, checking out books and helping patrons find information about gardening and local history. But her mind constantly drifted to wind patterns, ballistic calculations, and the metallic ring of bullets striking distant steel targets. During her lunch break, Sarah drove to the local sporting goods store to inquire about shooting equipment. The selection was limited to hunting rifles and basic accessories, nothing approaching the sophisticated precision instruments she had used at the range. The sales clerk, a teenager who seemed more interested in his phone than customers, could not answer her technical questions about scope specifications or ammunition types. "You might want to try the gun shop over in Millerville," he suggested without looking up from his screen. "They specialize in custom rifles and competition stuff." Millerville was 45 minutes away, but Sarah made the drive after work. The shop turned out to be exactly what she needed, a serious establishment filled with precision rifles, high-end scopes, and knowledgeable staff who spoke the technical language she was beginning to learn. The owner, a woman named Linda who had competed nationally for over a decade, listened patiently while Sarah explained her situation and goals. Linda examined the shooting data Matt had given Sarah and asked detailed questions about her experience and budget. "Based on your progress after one afternoon, I'd recommend starting with a solid foundation rifle that can grow with your skills," Linda said, leading Sarah to a display case containing several precision rifles. This Remington 706.5 Creedmoor would be perfect for learning. It's accurate enough for competitive shooting, but forgiving enough for a beginner. The rifle Linda recommended was beautiful in its functional simplicity, a heavy barrel, precision stock, and mounting system designed for serious optics. The price was substantial, but not impossible, especially if Sarah sold some inherited jewelry that had been sitting and used in her safety deposit box. "You'll also need a quality scope, bipod, and reloading equipment if you plan to shoot regularly," Linda continued, making notes on a pad. "The complete setup will run about $4,000, but it will last for years and perform at professional levels." Sarah left the shop with a detailed equipment list and commitment to return the following weekend with a decision. The drive home gave her time to consider the financial and practical implications of pursuing long-range shooting seriously. $4,000 represented a significant portion of her savings, and regular practice would require substantial time commitments. More concerning was the question of whether her initial success had been beginner's luck rather than genuine aptitude. One afternoon of shooting under ideal conditions with expert coaching might not translate to consistent performance under varying circumstances. These doubts were temporarily forgotten when Sarah attended the regional competition as Matt's guest observer. The event was held at a different range, longer and more challenging than the facility where she had first shot. Targets were positioned at distances ranging from 600 to 1,600 yards, with competitors attempting to score hits under time pressure and changing environmental conditions. Sarah was amazed by the diversity of competitors, men and women of various ages and backgrounds, united by their shared passion for precision shooting. She watched teachers, mechanics, retirees, and business professionals prepare their equipment with the methodical attention of surgeons preparing for complex operations. The rifles were even more sophisticated than anything Sarah had seen before, custom-built instruments that cost more than her car and represented years of careful development and refinement. Scopes provided magnification levels that made distant targets appear close enough to touch. But what impressed Sarah most was the mental discipline demonstrated by successful competitors. They moved deliberately through shooting sequences, methodically checking wind conditions, calculating corrections, and executing shots with calm precision despite time pressure and external distractions. Long-range shooting is chess, not checkers, explained Rebecca, a veterinarian from Denver who had won multiple state championships. Every shot requires analyzing dozens of variables and making precise adjustments. Physical skill is important, but mental discipline separates good shooters from great ones. Sarah watched Rebecca engage targets at ranges beyond anything Sarah had attempted. The woman appeared relaxed and confident as she worked through a sequence of shots from 800 to 1,400 yards, hitting every target despite wind conditions that were challenging even experienced competitors. "How long have you been shooting?" Sarah asked during a break between relay rounds. Rebecca smiled. "Seriously? About 3 years. I started after my divorce when I needed something completely different to focus on. Turns out I had natural ability combined with the patience and analytical thinking required for precision shooting." The conversation continued during lunch, with Rebecca sharing insights about equipment selection, training methods, and the competitive shooting community. Sarah learned that many successful competitors had started later in life and progressed rapidly through dedicated practice and systematic learning. "The secret is consistent practice with proper coaching," Rebecca explained. "Long-range shooting skills develop through repetition and gradual progression to more challenging distances and conditions. Natural talent helps, but commitment to improvement matters more." After watching the complete competition, Sarah felt both inspired and intimidated. The skill levels demonstrated by top competitors seemed almost superhuman, with several shooters consistently hitting targets at ranges approaching 1 mile. Yet she also recognized that these achievements represented accumulated experience and training rather than impossible natural gifts. During the drive home, Matt provided additional perspective on what Sarah had witnessed. "Those top shooters weren't born with supernatural abilities," he said. "They started as beginners just like everyone else and progressed through systematic practice and learning. The impressive part is their dedication to continuous improvement over years of competition." Matt also mentioned that several competitors had specifically asked about Sarah after hearing about her remarkable first day at the range. Word was spreading through the local shooting community about the librarian who had demonstrated exceptional natural ability and rapid learning. "There's definitely interest in seeing how you progress," Matt said. Rebecca mentioned that she'd be willing to provide coaching if you decide to pursue competitive shooting seriously. "Having a mentor like her would accelerate your development significantly." That evening, Sarah made her decision. She called Linda at the gun shop and arranged to purchase the complete equipment package they had discussed. The financial commitment was significant, but Sarah realized she had been saving money for years without any particular goal or purpose. Investing in equipment that would enable pursuing a genuine passion seemed like the most sensible use of those accumulated funds. The waiting period for background checks and equipment assembly meant Sarah would not have her own rifle for another week. In the meantime, Matt arranged additional practice sessions using his backup equipment. These sessions focused on developing consistent shooting fundamentals and understanding environmental factors that affected bullet trajectory. Sarah's progress continued to exceed normal expectations. She quickly mastered the technical aspects of scope adjustment, wind reading, and range estimation. More importantly, she demonstrated the mental discipline required for precision shooting under various conditions. "You have the temperament for long-range shooting," observed Carlos during one practice session. "Most beginners get frustrated when they miss shots and lose focus on fundamental techniques. You analyze misses objectively and make appropriate corrections for subsequent attempts." By the end of her second week of shooting, Sarah was consistently hitting targets out to 1,000 yards. Her groups at shorter distances were tight enough to suggest competition-level accuracy potential with additional refinement. The transformation was not limited to shooting skills. Colleagues at the library noticed changes in Sarah's demeanor and confidence. She seemed more focused and energetic, with a sense of purpose that had been absent for years. Even routine library tasks were approached with renewed enthusiasm. Betty was particularly curious about the source of Sarah's changed attitude. "You seem different lately," she commented while they were processing a shipment of new books. "More confident somehow. Did something happen that I should know about?" Sarah smiled as she thought about how to explain her newfound passion to someone who might not understand the appeal of precision shooting. "I've been learning a new skill," she said simply. "Something I never thought I could do, but it turns out I have some natural ability for it." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah's equipment shipment. Linda had personally delivered the rifle and accessories, wanting to ensure everything was properly configured and functional. The precision rifle looked almost military in Sarah's modest living room, its sophisticated optics and heavy construction suggesting serious purpose. "This is a significant investment in your future as a precision shooter," Linda said as she explained the rifle's features and proper maintenance procedures. "With proper care and regular practice, this equipment will serve you well for years of competitive shooting." That weekend, Sarah took her new rifle to the range for its first test session. The difference between using her own properly fitted equipment versus borrowed rifles was immediately apparent. Everything felt more natural and responsive, like driving a familiar car compared to rental vehicles. Matt helped Sarah zero the scope and develop initial data for various distances and conditions. The process was methodical and time-consuming, but essential for establishing baseline performance with her specific equipment and ammunition combination. Sarah's first group at 100 yards measured less than an inch, indicating excellent mechanical precision from both rifle and shooter. Subsequent groups at increasing distances confirmed that her equipment was capable of accuracy levels required for serious competitive shooting. "Time to try some serious distance," Matt suggested after Sarah had demonstrated consistent precision at ranges up to 800 yards. The 1,000-yard target appeared impossibly small through Sarah's scope, barely visible even at maximum magnification. Matt explained the calculations required for bullet drop compensation and wind correction at that extreme range. Sarah's first shot at 1,000 yards missed the target completely, disappearing into the mountainside beyond. Her second shot was closer, but still off the steel plate. Matt encouraged patience, explaining that successful extreme-range shots often required multiple attempts to properly read conditions. The breakthrough came on Sarah's fifth shot when she finally connected with the distant steel target. The sound of impact took nearly 3 seconds to reach the shooting position, emphasizing the extreme distance involved. The achievement felt momentous, proof that ordinary people could master extraordinary skills through dedication and proper training. "That's your first official long-range hit," Matt said with satisfaction. "Everything from here is just building on this foundation and pushing distances even further." As they packed equipment at the end of the session, Sarah reflected on the remarkable changes in her life over just 3 weeks. The mundane routine that had defined her existence was being replaced by purposeful pursuit of a challenging and rewarding skill. More significantly, she was beginning to envision possibilities that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. Competition shooting, advanced training, perhaps even coaching others who shared her newly discovered passion. 2 months after her first shot, Sarah stood at the edge of what would become the most challenging moment of her shooting career. The Colorado State Long Range Championship was being held at a high-altitude facility near Crested Butte, where thin air and unpredictable mountain winds created some of the most difficult shooting conditions in North America. Sarah had entered the novice division despite having only 8 weeks of shooting experience. Her rapid progress had attracted attention throughout the regional shooting community, but competition under pressure would test whether her skills were genuine or simply the result of favorable practice conditions. The week leading up to the championship had been filled with intensive preparation. Rebecca had provided daily coaching sessions, focusing on mental preparation and stress management techniques. Matt had helped Sarah develop detailed data cards for her rifle, documenting precise corrections for various atmospheric conditions and distances. "Competition shooting is different from practice," Rebecca explained during their final training session. "Everything feels more intense when scores matter and other people are watching. The key is maintaining your normal shooting process regardless of external pressure." Sarah's equipment had been meticulously prepared for the competition. Linda had personally inspected every component, ensuring optimal performance and reliability. The rifle had been test-fired extensively at various distances, confirming consistent accuracy under different environmental conditions. The night before the competition, Sarah barely slept. Her mind raced through shooting sequences, wind-reading techniques, and contingency plans for equipment problems. She had visualized successful shots at every target distance, but uncertainty about performing under actual competition pressure kept her awake until nearly dawn. Morning brought clear skies and light winds, ideal conditions for long-range shooting. The competition facility was more sophisticated than anything Sarah had previously experienced, with electronic targets that provided instant feedback and computerized scoring systems that eliminated human error. Competitors began arriving before sunrise, their vehicles loaded with elaborate equipment trailers and custom rifle cases. Sarah felt intimidated by the obvious experience and preparation demonstrated by other shooters, many of whom had been competing for years or decades. Registration confirmed Sarah's entry in the novice division, which included shooters with less than 1 year of competitive experience. Even within this category, she was clearly the least experienced participant. Several competitors mentioned having heard about the librarian who started shooting 8 weeks ago, though most seemed skeptical that anyone could develop competitive skills so quickly. The competition format involved 4 stages at increasing distances: 600, 800, 1,000, and 1,200 yards. Each stage required hitting steel targets of decreasing size, with points awarded for accuracy and time penalties for misses. Sarah's first stage went better than expected. The 600-yard targets seemed almost easy after weeks of practice at longer distances. She hit all 5 targets cleanly, posting a perfect score that surprised both herself and observing competitors. "Nice shooting," commented an experienced competitor named Frank who had been watching Sarah's performance. "Those were solid hits with good fundamentals. How are you feeling about the longer distances?" Sarah admitted nervousness about the upcoming 800 and 1,000-yard stages, which would push her skills beyond comfortable practice ranges. Frank offered encouragement, mentioning that many competitors struggled with nerves during their first serious competition. The 800-yard stage proved more challenging due to shifting wind conditions that had not been present during the morning session. Sarah's first shot missed low and left, victim of a wind gust that appeared just as she squeezed the trigger. Rebecca approached during the pause between shots, offering quiet coaching about reading wind conditions in mountain terrain. "Don't overthink the miss," she advised. "Stay focused on your normal process and trust your training." Sarah's subsequent shots at 800 yards were more successful. She managed 4 hits out of 5 attempts, placing her in the middle of the novice division standings. The miss was frustrating, but she recognized that wind reading skills would develop only through experience and practice. During the lunch break, Sarah mingled with other competitors and learned about the broader world of precision shooting. Many participants traveled regularly to competitions throughout the western United States, pursuing national rankings and professional development opportunities. "This sport becomes addictive," explained Maria, a software engineer from California who had been competing for 3 years. "You start thinking you'll just try one local match. Then, suddenly, you're planning vacation time around major competitions and spending weekends at the range working on technique improvements." The afternoon brought the most challenging stages of the competition. 1,000 yards represented the limit of Sarah's reliable accuracy, while 1,200 yards would push her into territory she had only attempted a few times during practice. Sarah approached the 1,000-yard line with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Success at this distance would demonstrate that her skills were legitimate and competitive. Failure might suggest that her rapid progress had reached natural limits. The first shot at 1,000 yards was a clean hit, dead center on the steel target. The sound of impact echoed across the valley several seconds later, followed by applause from spectators who had been watching the novice division with interest. 4 more shots yielded 3 additional hits, and 1 near miss that struck the edge of the target frame. Sarah's performance at 1,000 yards was among the best in the novice division, establishing her as a legitimate competitor despite minimal experience. The final stage at 1,200 yards would separate serious shooters from recreational participants. At that extreme distance, even experienced competitors often struggled to achieve consistent hits. For Sarah, it represented unknown territory where success would depend more on luck and favorable conditions than proven ability. Standing behind the firing line, Sarah felt the weight of expectation from spectators who had been following her remarkable debut performance. Local shooting enthusiasts were curious whether the librarian's success would continue at maximum distance, while competitors wondered if her rapid progress was sustainable under pressure. Rebecca provided final coaching before Sarah assumed her shooting position. "Trust your equipment and training," she said quietly. "The fundamentals that work at shorter distances apply here too. Don't try to do anything special. Just execute your normal shooting process." Sarah settled behind her rifle and began the systematic process of preparing for an extreme distance shot. Wind conditions were assessed using flags positioned at various ranges between the shooting position and target. Atmospheric data was consulted to determine precise corrections for elevation and windage. Through her scope, the 1,200-yard target appeared almost impossibly small, barely larger than a pinhead even at maximum magnification. Sarah could see heat mirage dancing across the intervening terrain, indicating variable wind conditions that would complicate bullet trajectory calculations. Her first shot at 1,200 yards missed completely, passing somewhere over the target without striking steel or backstop. The miss was disappointing, but not unexpected given the extreme distance and challenging conditions. Matt approached during the brief pause between shots, offering encouragement and tactical advice. "The conditions are tricky today," he said. "Even experienced shooters are struggling with wind calls at this distance. Focus on making the best shot you can rather than worrying about results." Sarah's second attempt was closer, striking the ground just short of the target. The impact crater was visible through spotting scopes, indicating that her elevation calculation was nearly correct, but wind compensation needed adjustment. Adjustments for the third shot included additional windage correction based on flag readings and observed mirage patterns. Sarah took extra time preparing, double-checking calculations, and ensuring optimal shooting position before attempting the shot. The third shot connected with the edge of the 1,200-yard target, producing a distinctive metallic ring that carried clearly across the valley. The hit was not perfect, but it demonstrated that Sarah could engage targets at ranges that challenged even experienced competitors. Her final two shots at 1,200 yards were less successful, with one near miss and one complete miss due to wind conditions that continued shifting throughout the stage. Still, 1 hit out of 5 attempts at extreme distance was respectable performance for any competitor, let alone someone with 8 weeks of experience. As scores were calculated and results announced, Sarah learned that her overall performance had placed her third in the novice division. More importantly, her 1,200-yard hit had been one of only 7 successful impacts at that distance among all competitors in her category. The award ceremony was a surreal experience for Sarah, who just months earlier had been living a completely predictable life with no connection to competitive shooting. Standing on the podium with her bronze medal, she felt both pride in her accomplishment and amazement at how dramatically her life had changed. "This is just the beginning," Rebecca said during the post-competition celebration. "Your natural ability, combined with proper training, could take you much further than novice division competitions. Have you considered pursuing national-level events?" The suggestion seemed almost ridiculous to Sarah, who still thought of herself as a beginner with minimal experience. But the day's performance had proven that rapid skill development was possible with dedication and proper guidance. During the drive home, Sarah reflected on the broader implications of her competitive debut. Success at the state championship had validated her decision to pursue precision shooting seriously, but it also opened possibilities she had never considered. National competitions featured the world's best shooters competing at distances beyond anything Sarah had attempted. Professional development opportunities existed for skilled competitors, including equipment sponsorships and coaching positions. More immediately, local shooting opportunities were expanding as Sarah's reputation grew. Several competitors had mentioned advanced training courses and specialized clinics that could accelerate her development further. The ordinary librarian who had discovered shooting just 8 weeks earlier was evolving into someone with extraordinary potential and expanding opportunities. But the most significant challenge still lay ahead, a test that would push her skills beyond anything she had yet attempted and establish her place among the sport's most accomplished practitioners. That challenge would come sooner than expected, in the form of an invitation that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about the limits of human marksmanship and her own potential for achieving the impossible. The invitation arrived the following Tuesday in an official envelope bearing the logo of the United States Precision Shooting Association. Inside was a formal request for Sarah to participate in a special demonstration event featuring extreme long-range shooting at distances up to 4,000 meters. The event would showcase cutting-edge equipment and techniques, with participation limited to shooters who had demonstrated exceptional aptitude and rapid development. Sarah's performance at the state championship had apparently attracted attention from national-level organizations seeking to promote the sport and identify emerging talent. 4,000 meters represented nearly 2.5 miles, a distance Sarah could barely comprehend in terms of practical shooting. The invitation suggested that such shots were possible with proper equipment and ideal conditions, though success rates even among expert shooters remained extremely low. Sarah stared at the invitation for several minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what was being proposed. 8 weeks ago, hitting a target at 300 yards had seemed challenging. Now she was being invited to attempt shots at distances that pushed the absolute limits of current technology and human capability. The decision would require careful consideration of her skill level, available preparation time, and willingness to attempt something that might result in spectacular failure in front of experienced shooters and media representatives who would be documenting the event. But, as Sarah considered the opportunity, she realized that extraordinary achievements required accepting extraordinary challenges. The ordinary woman who had lived a predictable life for 32 years was being offered a chance to attempt something truly remarkable, something that would test the absolute limits of what was possible through dedication, preparation, and maybe a little luck. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing on a remote plateau in Wyoming, staring across a valley so vast that the target was invisible to the naked eye. The United States Precision Shooting Association had selected this location specifically for extreme long-range demonstrations, where clear air and stable weather conditions provided optimal circumstances for shots approaching the theoretical limits of current technology. The preparation for this moment had been unlike anything Sarah had previously experienced. Special equipment had been provided by major manufacturers eager to showcase their latest innovations. The rifle she would be using was a custom-built instrument worth more than most people's cars, equipped with optics that could resolve details at distances measured in miles rather than yards. Professional coaching had been arranged with David Chun, a former military sniper who held multiple world records for extreme long-range accuracy. David had worked with Sarah for 2 weeks, refining her technique and preparing her mentally for the unique challenges of shooting at 4,000 meters. At this distance, you're not just fighting wind and gravity, David explained during their final practice session. You're dealing with atmospheric layers that can bend bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. The Coriolis effect becomes significant. Earth's rotation actually influences bullet flight. Even the curvature of the planet matters at 4,000 meters. The mathematics involved in calculating a 4,000-meter shot were staggering. Computer software was required to process all the environmental variables and generate firing solutions that accounted for factors Sarah was still learning to understand. Temperature gradients, humidity variations, air pressure changes, and wind patterns at multiple altitudes all influenced bullet trajectory. The technology makes this shot theoretically possible, David continued. But technology can only do so much. Success ultimately depends on perfect execution of fundamentals under tremendous pressure. One tiny error in shooting technique will result in a miss measured in tens of meters. Media representatives had been documenting Sarah's preparation and would be filming the actual attempt. Her story, ordinary librarian becomes extreme long-range shooter in just 3 months, had captured public imagination. Television interviews and magazine articles had transformed her from anonymous small-town resident to minor celebrity within the shooting sports community. The pressure was enormous, both from external expectations and Sarah's own desire to prove that her rapid progress was legitimate rather than lucky coincidence. Failure at 4,000 meters would be disappointing, but understandable. Success would establish her as one of the most naturally gifted shooters in the sport's history. Weather conditions on the morning of the attempt were nearly perfect. Light winds, stable air pressure, clear visibility extending dozens of miles across the Wyoming landscape. The target, a steel plate measuring 4 feet by 4 feet, had been positioned precisely 4,000 meters from the shooting position using GPS coordinates verified by multiple measurement systems. Sarah's preparation began hours before the actual shot. Equipment was methodically inspected and calibrated. Environmental conditions were measured and recorded. Preliminary calculations were performed using the latest atmospheric data. Nothing could be left to chance at such extreme distance. The shooting position itself was a marvel of engineering precision. A concrete platform had been constructed to eliminate any possibility of movement or vibration. Spotting scopes were positioned to provide multiple viewing angles of the target area. Communication systems allowed real-time coordination between shooters and spotters. Other participants in the demonstration included some of the world's most accomplished extreme long-range shooters. Sarah was by far the least experienced, though her rapid development and natural ability had earned respect from competitors who typically required years to reach similar skill levels. Nervous? Asked Amanda Foster, the former accountant whose photograph had first inspired Sarah to pursue long-range shooting. Amanda would be attempting her own 4,000-meter shot later in the day. Sarah admitted to feeling anxious but tried to focus on the systematic shooting process that had served her well during competition. Fundamentals remained the same regardless of distance: proper position, breath control, sight alignment, smooth trigger squeeze. The crowd of observers included shooting industry executives, media representatives, and dozens of accomplished marksmen who had traveled specifically to witness the extreme long-range demonstration. Sarah tried to ignore the attention and concentrate on her pre-shot routine. David provided final coaching as Sarah assumed her shooting position behind the massive rifle. "Remember everything we practiced," he said quietly. "Trust your equipment, trust your training, trust your natural ability. This shot is within your capabilities. Now prove it to yourself and everyone watching." Through the high-powered scope, Sarah could barely discern the target even at maximum magnification. It appeared as a tiny speck against the distant mountainside, seemingly impossible to hit with any projectile fired from nearly 2.5 miles away. Environmental conditions had been entered into the ballistic computer, generating a firing solution that called for specific scope adjustments and aiming points. Sarah made the required corrections methodically, double-checking each setting against written calculations. Wind flags positioned at various distances showed light and variable conditions, generally favorable for extreme long-range shooting, but requiring careful interpretation and ongoing monitoring. Sarah studied the flags for several minutes, memorizing patterns and trying to predict any changes that might occur during bullet flight time. The bullet's journey to the target would take approximately 6 seconds, during which changing wind conditions could push the projectile significantly off course. Sarah would need to time her shot for a moment when conditions throughout the entire flight path appeared stable and predictable. Breathing control became critical as Sarah prepared for the shot. At 4,000 meters, even tiny movements caused by heartbeat or respiration could result in misses measured in meters. She settled into the relaxed breathing pattern that had been refined through hundreds of practice sessions. The crosshairs settled on the calculated aiming point, accounting for bullet drop that would measure dozens of feet at such extreme distance. Sarah's finger found the trigger and began applying steady rearward pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment. The moment of truth arrived with surprising suddenness. The rifle recoiled against Sarah's shoulder, launching a precisely machined bullet on its long journey across the Wyoming landscape. The sound of the shot echoed across the valley, followed by absolute silence as everyone waited to see the result. 6 seconds felt like an eternity as the bullet traveled its ballistic arc toward the distant target. Sarah maintained her shooting position, following through with perfect technique, while spotters tracked the projectile's flight path through powerful optics. The impact was confirmed by multiple observers simultaneously, a metallic clang that carried clearly across the valley despite the enormous distance. The 4-foot steel target had been struck almost dead center, validating the firing solution and proving that Sarah's execution had been essentially perfect. Cheers erupted from the crowd of observers as the significance of the achievement became clear. A woman who had been completely unknown to the shooting sports community just 4 months earlier had successfully engaged a target at one of the longest distances in the sport's history. Sarah remained in position for several seconds, processing what had just occurred. The shot represented not just personal achievement, but validation of the entire journey from ordinary librarian to accomplished extreme long-range shooter. Every hour of practice, every technical lesson, every moment of doubt had led to this singular moment of triumph. Media representatives rushed forward for interviews, wanting to capture Sarah's immediate reaction to achieving something that most people would consider impossible. She struggled to articulate her feelings, still amazed that the shot had connected with the distant target. "I honestly didn't expect to hit it," Sarah admitted during the impromptu press conference. 4,000 meters is so far beyond anything I'd attempted before. I just focused on executing perfect fundamentals and hoped for the best possible outcome. David Chin's assessment was more technical, but equally enthusiastic. "That was one of the most impressive shots I've ever witnessed," he told reporters. The conditions were favorable, but success at 4,000 meters requires extraordinary precision in every aspect of shooting technique. Sarah executed flawlessly under tremendous pressure. Amanda Foster offered perspective from someone who understood the technical challenges involved. "I've been shooting extreme long range for 8 years, and 4,000-meter shots are difficult even under perfect conditions. For someone with Sarah's limited experience to achieve success on her first attempt is simply remarkable." The demonstration continued with other shooters attempting their own extreme distance shots, but Sarah's achievement remained the highlight of the day. Several participants acknowledged that her success had set a new standard for rapid skill development in precision shooting. Industry executives approached Sarah with offers for equipment sponsorships and promotional opportunities. The success had established her as a marketable personality who could help promote long-range shooting to broader audiences. More significantly, invitations began arriving for advanced training programs and international competitions that could further accelerate Sarah's development. The world of professional shooting was opening possibilities that would have seemed fantastical just months earlier. During the flight home, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary transformation her life had undergone. The ordinary woman who had awakened 4 months earlier with no purpose beyond maintaining library routines had become someone capable of achieving feats that challenged the limits of human precision. The 4,000-meter shot would be remembered as a landmark achievement, but Sarah understood it represented a beginning rather than an ending. New challenges and opportunities were emerging that could take her even further beyond the boundaries of what seemed possible. More importantly, she had discovered that extraordinary achievements were available to ordinary people willing to pursue them with dedication and proper guidance. Natural talent was helpful, but commitment to continuous improvement and willingness to accept challenges were more significant factors in determining ultimate success. The librarian's desk that had once represented the boundaries of Sarah's world now seemed impossibly small compared to the horizons that were opening before her. She had learned that the most significant limitations were often self-imposed, and that the greatest adventures began with simple decisions to try something new. At 32 years old, Sarah Mitchell had discovered that it was never too late to become someone completely different than who you had always been. The ordinary woman who had fired that first shot just 4 months earlier was gone forever, replaced by someone extraordinary who was just beginning to explore the full extent of what might be possible. The 4,000-meter shot would be documented in record books and remembered in shooting sports history. But, for Sarah, it represented something even more valuable: proof that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they discovered their true potential and pursued it with unwavering determination. The transformation from invisible librarian to world-class marksman had required just 4 months of focused effort. The journey that lay ahead, with all its possibilities and challenges, promised to be even more remarkable than the unlikely beginning that had started it all.